The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and expensive wood polish. I sat in the corner chair, my worn cardigan a stark contrast to the mahogany furniture surrounding me. Across the mahogany desk, my son Marcus shifted in his seat, his designer suit probably worth more than 3 months of my Social Security checks. His wife Jessica sat beside him, diamonds glinting on her fingers, as she checked her phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Mr. Harrison, the attorney, adjusted his glasses and looked at me with something I couldn't quite read in his eyes. Pity? No. Understanding, maybe. Mrs. Chen, he began, and I noticed Marcus flinch slightly at my name. Thank you for coming today. I know this is difficult. Difficult. That was one word for it. I hadn't seen my son in 5 years. 5 years since he'd moved me into Sunshine Valley Senior Living, the cheapest facility he could find that wouldn't make him look completely heartless to his country club friends. 5 years since he'd stopped returning my calls. 5 years since I'd become an embarrassment he'd rather forget. Marcus cleared his throat. Can we get on with this? I have a board meeting at 3. Jessica squeezed his hand, giving him that practiced smile she'd perfected. The same smile she'd given me 10 years ago at their engagement party, right before suggesting I might be more comfortable skipping the wedding photos. I'd gone to their wedding, of course, but I'd watched from the back row. My own son's wedding. Of course, Mr. Harrison said, opening a thick folder. I'll get straight to the point. Marcus, your mother has named you as the primary beneficiary of a substantial trust fund. The room went silent. Marcus's head snapped up. What? A trust fund valued at approximately $12 million. Jessica's phone clattered to the floor. Marcus stared at the lawyer, then at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. That's impossible. My mother is. She doesn't have. He couldn't even finish the sentence. Mom? His voice cracked slightly on the word. It was the first time he'd called me that in years. Where did you get $12 million? I folded my hands in my lap, the same hands that had scrubbed floors, changed bedpans, and worked 3 jobs to make sure he'd never know what it felt like to be hungry. I didn't, I said quietly. Mr. Harrison pulled out a document. The trust was established 23 years ago by David Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies. Perhaps you've heard of the company? Marcus's face went white. Chen Technologies? That's a Fortune 500 company. Dad's last name was Chen, but David Chen is not your father, I said, my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. He's your brother. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica found her voice first. Brother? Marcus is an only child. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw the little boy I'd raised peeking through the expensive facade. The boy who used to help me fold laundry in our tiny apartment. The boy who'd cried in my arms when kids at school made fun of his secondhand clothes. Before success changed him. Before Jessica convinced him that poor people were somehow less than. No, I said softly. He's not. Let me go back. Back 35 years, to when I was young and stupid and thought love could fix anything. I was 27 when I married Marcus's father, Robert. He was charming, handsome, and completely wrong for me. 6 months into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. 6 months after that, I found out Robert had another family in another state. By the time Marcus was born, Robert was gone, and I was alone with a baby and $23 to my name. I worked as a night nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital. The pay was terrible, but it was what I could get without a degree. During the day, I slept when Marcus slept and cleaned houses when he was at the neighbors'. Mrs. Rodriguez watched him for free because I'd helped her mother during her last days. When Marcus was 3, I found the first one, David. I was working a night shift when they brought him in. 7 years old, Chinese, covered in bruises from the foster home that was supposed to be temporary. His parents had died in a car accident 6 months before. He had no other family. The system had failed him. I sat with him that night. He didn't speak English well, but he understood kindness. When he grabbed my hand and wouldn't let go, something in my heart cracked wide open. 3 months later, I filed the paperwork to become his foster mother. Everyone thought I was crazy. You can barely feed 1 kid, my sister said. How are you going to manage 2? But I couldn't leave him there. I just couldn't. A year later came Maria, 10 years old, Colombian, left behind when her mother was deported. Then James, 9, black, both parents dead from drugs. He'd been in 7 foster homes in 2 years. Nobody wanted him because he had behavior problems. What he had was trauma, and nobody had patience for a traumatized black boy. By the time Marcus was 8, our tiny apartment held 5 souls. Marcus and 4 foster kids who had nowhere else to go. I worked 3 jobs: nursing at night, cleaning houses in the morning, and watching other people's kids in the afternoon. I slept 4 hours a day if I was lucky. We ate rice and beans most nights. We bought clothes from Goodwill. But we had each other. Marcus never complained. He shared his room, shared his toys, shared everything. He helped me with the younger ones, reading to them, making sure they did their homework. "We're a team, Mom," he'd say. All of us. But then high school came. Marcus got a scholarship to a fancy prep school. Suddenly, he was around kids who had summer homes and trust funds, kids whose parents were lawyers and doctors and CEOs. He started being ashamed of where we lived, of the fact that I drove a 15-year-old car, of his foster siblings. "Why can't you dress nicer when you pick me up?" he asked once, when he was 16. I looked down at my nurse's scrubs, stained from a double shift. "I came straight from work, honey. I didn't have time to." "Never mind," he'd said, walking ahead of me so his friends wouldn't see us together. It got worse in college. He went to Stanford on a full ride. Brilliant boy that he was. Came home less and less. When he did come home, he'd cringe at our cramped apartment, at the noise, at everything that reminded him of where he came from. The foster kids noticed. David, by then a sophomore at Berkeley studying computer science, pulled me aside one day. "Mom," he said, "they all called me Mom by then. Marcus doesn't want to be part of this family anymore, does he?" "He's just finding his way," I'd said. But we both knew it wasn't true. After college, Marcus landed a job at a tech startup in San Francisco. Met Jessica at some networking event. She was everything I wasn't: polished, educated, from money, old money, the kind that looked down on people like us. When Marcus brought her to meet us, I saw the disgust flicker across her face when she saw where we lived. 4 foster kids, now all in their 20s, had gathered for dinner. David had just started his own company. Maria was finishing medical school. James was working as a social worker, helping other kids in the system. Jessica smiled her plastic smile through dinner and never came back. Marcus's visits became phone calls. Phone calls became texts. Texts became silence. When Jessica got pregnant with their first child, I wasn't invited to the baby shower. When their daughter Emma was born, I saw the photos on Facebook, posted by Jessica's mother, who'd apparently been in the delivery room. I met my granddaughter when she was 6 months old, at a restaurant Jessica chose because it was neutral territory. Emma was beautiful. She had Marcus's eyes. I got to hold her for 20 minutes before Jessica said they had to go. That was 7 years ago. 3 years ago, I got sick. Cancer. The prognosis was good if I could afford the treatment. Terrible if I couldn't. Marcus's response to my call was to send a check for $5,000 and suggest I look into government programs. David flew home from a business trip in Tokyo. Maria used her medical connections to get me into a trial program. James organized a fundraiser. My foster children, the ones with no blood connection to me, dropped everything to save my life. Marcus sent a card that said, "Get well soon." 2 years ago, when I finished treatment but couldn't work anymore, Marcus made arrangements for Sunshine Valley. "It's a great facility, Mom," he'd said over the phone. Not in person. Over the phone. "You'll love it there." I didn't love it there. The food was terrible. The staff was overworked, and my room was so small I could barely turn around. But it was what Marcus could afford without affecting his lifestyle, and I was too tired to fight. David offered to move me somewhere better. Maria offered to let me live with her family. James said his door was always open, but I couldn't. They'd already given me so much. They deserved to live their own lives without their old foster mother being a burden. So I stayed at Sunshine Valley, in my tiny room with the flickering light and the view of the parking lot. Marcus visited once, in the beginning, stayed for 15 minutes, and never came back. Jessica never came at all. My foster children visited every week. Every single week. David would fly in from wherever his business took him. Maria would bring her kids. James would bring books and read to me. They'd have dinner with me in the cafeteria, not caring that the other residents stared at our unusual family. "Why doesn't your real son come?" one of the nurses asked once. "These are my real children," I'd replied. 6 months ago, David pulled me aside after one of his visits. "Mom," he said, and I could see he was struggling with something. "I need to tell you something." That's when I learned the truth. David's company, the little startup he'd begun in a garage 15 years ago, had gone public. He was worth billions, with a B. "I wanted to tell you before," he said, "but I wanted to make sure it was real, that I hadn't just gotten lucky. I wanted to prove that I made something of myself because of what you taught me, not despite it." He'd set up a trust fund for me years ago, he explained. $15 million, structured so I'd never have to worry about money again. But there were conditions. "What conditions?" I'd asked. "You can only use it for people you love most," he said. "You can give it away, live on it, whatever you want, but it has to go to family, your real family." I'd cried then. Cried for the little boy who'd arrived at the hospital covered in bruises, who I'd held through nightmares, who I'd taught to read English, who'd become one of the most successful businessmen in the country. "There's more," David had said. "When you pass, and that better not be for another 40 years, whatever's left goes to whoever you choose. But I made one requirement." "What's that?" "Marcus gets a portion automatically. 12 million. Because he's your son, and you love him, even if he doesn't deserve it. David, but," he continued, "there's a condition for Marcus. He has to visit your grave once a month for 2 years, every month. If he misses even once, his portion goes to Maria, James, and me, divided equally." "That's cruel," I'd whispered. "No, Mom. That's fair. You gave him everything. He gave you nothing. If he wants the money, he has to give you something back. Even if it's just his time, even if you're not here to see it." I tried to argue, but David was adamant. "You taught us that family shows up," he said. "It's time Marcus learned that lesson." The trust was finalized 3 months ago. I hadn't told Marcus. What was I going to say? "Hey son, your foster brother is rich and he set up money for you, but only if you visit my grave?" He'd probably think I was senile. But then last week, I got pneumonia. Bad pneumonia. The kind that, at my age, after cancer, could be serious. The nurses called Marcus. He didn't answer. They called 3 times. On the 4th call, Jessica answered. "Is this really necessary?" she'd asked. "Linda's always getting sick." I pulled through. I'm tougher than I look, but it made me think. David had structured the trust so that if something happened to me, Marcus would have to be informed. He'd have to face what he'd done, what he'd chosen. So when I got out of the hospital yesterday, I called Mr. Harrison and told him to set up the meeting. Marcus thought he was coming to discuss something routine. He had no idea. Now here we were, in this expensive office, with my son staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "I don't understand," Marcus said. His voice was shaky. "You said David is my brother?" "Foster brother," Jessica corrected automatically, and I saw David's wisdom in that moment. She couldn't even let that go. "When your father left," I said, "I was alone with you. I could barely make ends meet, but I met children who had nobody at all. I couldn't turn away from them. So you took in foster kids," Marcus said slowly. "I remember that, but David Chen?" "The David Chen? The same little boy who used to share his Halloween candy with you," I said. "The same one who taught you to play chess. The same one who helped you with your college applications." Marcus's face was doing something complicated. Memories warring with prejudice. Love fighting with shame. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Your mother was diagnosed with cancer 3 years ago, as you know. What you may not know is that David, Maria, and James pooled resources to cover her treatment. David also established this trust fund to ensure she'd never face financial hardship again." "Wait," Jessica said, her voice sharp. "Maria and James? You mean the other foster kids?" "Dr. Maria Rodriguez Chen." "Mr. Harrison said, consulting his notes, Chief of Pediatrics at Cedars-Sinai, and James Williams, Director of the Los Angeles Foster Care Reform Initiative. Yes." Marcus's hands were shaking. "Mom, I didn't know about the cancer. I called you," I said simply. "Multiple times. I sent money. $5,000, I said, for cancer treatment. Do you know how much cancer treatment costs, Marcus? He looked down at his hands. Those hands I'd held when he was learning to walk. Those hands that had stopped reaching for mine so long ago. The trust fund is $12 million for you, Mr. Harrison continued. All business. However, there are conditions. Jessica's head snapped up. Conditions? Yes. As specified by David Chen, who established the trust, Marcus must fulfill certain requirements to access the funds. He pulled out a document and began reading. First, Marcus must visit his mother's grave site once per month for 24 consecutive months. Each visit must be documented with photographic evidence submitted to this office. That's ridiculous, Jessica burst out. You can't put conditions on. Second, Mr. Harrison continued, ignoring her, if Marcus misses a single visit, the entire $12 million will be forfeited and redistributed equally among David Chen, Dr. Maria Rodriguez Chen, and James Williams. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. Mom's not even. You're sitting right here. I am, I said. For now. But I'm 67 years old, Marcus. I've had cancer. I had pneumonia last week. The nurses called you 4 times. His face crumbled. Jessica said it wasn't urgent. I almost died, I said quietly. Your daughter, my granddaughter, is 7 years old. She doesn't know my name. That's not fair, Jessica said. We've been busy. Busy, I repeated. Yes. Too busy to visit. Too busy to call. Too busy to let your daughter know her grandmother exists, but not too busy to show up when there's $12 million involved. The words hung in the air like smoke. There's more, Mr. Harrison said. He pulled out a letter, sealed with wax. Old-fashioned, the kind I used to use for special occasions. Your mother wrote this. She wanted me to read it after explaining the financial terms. He broke the seal and began to read in my voice. I'd recorded it weeks ago, wanting to say these words even if I wasn't here to say them myself. Marcus, by the time you hear this, you'll know about the money. You'll know that David, the foster child you grew up with, became successful beyond anyone's dreams. You'll know that I could have lived in luxury these last years, instead of that tiny room at Sunshine Valley. You're probably wondering why I didn't tell you. Why I let you put me in a cheap facility when I could have afforded better. The truth is, I wanted to see what you would do. Who you would be when there was nothing to gain from being my son. And I learned the answer. You chose status over family. Comfort over conscience. You chose a woman who was ashamed of where you came from, and you let that shame infect everything you were. I don't blame Jessica entirely. She only saw what you showed her, and you showed her that I was disposable. David could have bought me a mansion. Maria could have moved me in with her family. James offered me his spare room. But I stayed at Sunshine Valley because I needed to know if my own son would notice. If my own son would care. You didn't notice. You didn't care. But I still love you, Marcus. I still remember the little boy who used to make me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day, burned toast and watery orange juice that was the best meal I'd ever had. I remember you reading books to your foster siblings, being patient when they didn't understand. I remember the good in you, and I have to believe it's still there. The money is yours if you want it. $12 million. But there's a price. The price is showing up. Once a month. Every month. For 2 years. Bringing flowers to my grave. Sitting there and thinking about the choices you made. About the mother you threw away like yesterday's newspaper. If you can do that, if you can give me just 24 hours out of the next 2 years, the money is yours. But if you can't, if $12 million isn't enough to make you show up, then at least I'll know for certain what I've always suspected, that I lost my son long before I died. The choice is yours, sweetheart. It always has been. Love always, Mom. The silence after Mr. Harrison finished reading was absolute. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, each second falling like a stone into still water. Marcus was crying. Not just crying, sobbing. His shoulders shook, his face in his hands, and Jessica sat frozen beside him, her expression caught somewhere between horror and calculation. Marcus, she started, but he held up a hand. Don't, he whispered. Just don't. He looked up at me, and I saw my son for the first time in years. Not the polished CEO, not the country club member, but the boy who used to hold my hand in the grocery store. I'm sorry, he said. Mom, I'm so sorry. I know, I said. Because I did. I could see it in every line of his face. I don't want the money, he said, and Jessica made a choking sound. I don't care about the money. I just want— Can I still see you? Even without the conditions? Something warm bloomed in my chest. Of course you can, baby. You always could have. He stood up, this tall man in his expensive suit, and crossed the room. He knelt in front of my chair like he used to do when he was small and needed comfort, and he put his head in my lap and cried. I stroked his hair, the same way I did when he had nightmares at 4 years old, and let him cry it out. Jessica stood up. This is insane. Marcus, we need to think about this rationally. $12 million. Get out, Marcus said, his voice muffled against my cardigan. What? He lifted his head, his face blotchy and wet. Get out, Jessica. I need to talk to my mother alone. Marcus. Out. Now. She left, heels clicking angrily against the hardwood, and the door slammed behind her. Mr. Harrison quietly excused himself, leaving us alone. I'm a terrible person, Marcus said. No, I said firmly. You made terrible choices. There's a difference. I put you in that place. You were ashamed of me, of where we came from. Jessica made it worse, but the seed was already there. He nodded miserably. The guys at Stanford, their parents were so different from you. They had big houses and new cars, and they never had to work 2 jobs. I started being embarrassed. And then I met Jessica, and she came from that world, and I wanted so badly to fit in that you erased me. I finished gently. Yes, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I forgive you, I said, and watched his face crumple again. But Marcus, you need to understand something. Those conditions David put on the money, they're not about punishing you. They're about making sure you understand what family means. I don't care about the money. I know. But you're going to accept it anyway, and you're going to fulfill those conditions. Not for the $12 million, for me, to prove to yourself that you can show up, that you can be the man I raised you to be. He looked up at me, this broken, humbled version of my successful son. What if it's too late? It's never too late to start being better, I said. David learned that. He could have hated the system that failed him, but instead, he spent millions improving foster care. Maria could have been bitter about losing her mother, but she became a pediatrician to help other children. James could have let his trauma destroy him, but he became a social worker to help kids like him. They're amazing, Marcus said softly. They are. And do you know why? He shook his head. Because they chose to be. Every day, they choose love over bitterness, family over resentment. They choose to show up. I want to choose that too, he said. I want to show up, not just once a month at a grave, now, every day. Then start today, I said. Come have dinner with me at Sunshine Valley tonight. Meet the people I live with. See my life as it actually is, not as you imagine it to be. Okay, he said immediately. Yes, anything. And Marcus? Bring Emma. Your daughter should know her grandmother, and her foster uncles and aunt. His face brightened through the tears. She should. She really should. She's 7 now, and she's so smart, Mom. She's reading chapter books and she loves science, and he stopped. I have so much to tell you. Then tell me, I said simply. We have time. We did have time. Not as much as I'd like cancer and pneumonia, and 67 years had taught me that, but enough. Enough to rebuild what had been broken. Enough for Marcus to meet his daughter's grandmother, and for Emma to know where her father came from. Enough for Marcus to sit around my tiny room with David and Maria and James and learn what real family looked like. That night, Marcus came to dinner. He brought Emma, a beautiful little girl with her father's eyes and her mother's dark hair. She was shy at first, but when I offered her the chair next to mine, she took it. Are you really my grandma? She asked. I really am, I said. Daddy said you live here, she said, looking around at the dingy cafeteria. How come? Because your daddy put me here, I said honestly, and Marcus flinched. But it's okay. Sometimes people make mistakes. The important thing is that they fix them. Emma considered this seriously. Are you going to fix it, Daddy? Yes, Marcus said. I'm going to fix it. And he did. Not all at once, fixing years of neglect doesn't happen overnight, but bit by bit. He visited twice a week, then 3 times. He brought Emma every Saturday. When Jessica filed for divorce 3 months later, apparently being married to a man who chose his mother over millions wasn't part of her plan. Marcus didn't fight it. He gave her everything she asked for, except Emma. "My daughter needs to know her family," he told the judge. "Her real family." He moved me out of Sunshine Valley into a beautiful apartment near his house. Not because I asked, but because he wanted to. He had dinner with me every Sunday. He brought Emma to help me garden. He listened to my stories about his childhood and about his foster siblings' childhoods. 6 months after that meeting in the lawyer's office, David flew in for one of his visits. He found Marcus sitting in my living room, Emma on the floor doing homework while Marcus and I played Scrabble. "Marcus," David said, surprised. Marcus stood up and did something I never expected. He crossed the room and hugged his foster brother. "Thank you," Marcus said. "Thank you for the conditions. Thank you for making me show up." David hugged him back, and I saw them as I used to see them. 2 boys in a too small apartment, sharing toys and dreams, and a mother who loved them both. "You're my brother," David said simply. "That's what brothers do." That was 3 years ago. I'm 70 now, still here, still fighting. Marcus visits 3 times a week now, not because of any condition, but because he wants to. Emma calls me every day after school to tell me about her day. Jessica remarried some tech executive and doesn't bother us anymore. Last month, on Mother's Day, all my children gathered in my apartment. David flew in from Singapore. Maria came with her husband and 3 kids. James brought his new girlfriend. And Marcus was there with Emma, now 10 years old, and asking if she can call David and Maria and James uncle and aunt. "Of course you can," I told her. "They're family." "I know," she said seriously. Daddy explained about how you took care of kids who needed a mom, and how they love you, and how he forgot, but now he remembers. "That's right," I said. She thought about this for a moment. "When I grow up," she announced, "I want to be like you, Grandma. I want to help kids who need families." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. He squeezed my hand. "You already are like her," he said. "You have her heart." That night, after everyone had gone home and it was just Marcus and me cleaning up, he said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." "What's that, honey?" "I haven't touched the 12 million. Not a cent. I've been putting it in a trust fund for Emma, and for her future siblings if I'm lucky enough to have more kids. And when she's old enough, I'm going to tell her the whole story. About how I lost my way and how her great-uncle David gave me a chance to find it again." "That's beautiful," I said. "There's more," he said. "I talked to David and Maria and James. We're starting a foundation, in your name, to help foster families, to provide resources, to make sure no kid feels like they're a burden. We're calling it the Linda Chen Foundation for Foster Family Support." I couldn't speak. I just pulled my son into my arms and held him close, this man who'd been lost and found his way home. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I'm sorry it took me so long to remember that." "I love you too, baby," I said. I never stopped. And that's the truth of it, really. Love doesn't stop just because it's not returned. It doesn't end just because it's rejected. Real love, mother love, the kind that makes you take in broken children and work 3 jobs and sleep 4 hours a night, that love is eternal. I learned that from being a mother. And finally, after so many years, my son learned it too. The money was never the point. It never is. The point is showing up. The point is choosing love over comfort, family over status, connection over pride. The point is that $12 million isn't worth anything if you spend it alone. Marcus knows that now. And every time I see him with Emma, teaching her to be kind, to be generous, to value people over things, I know that the legacy I'm leaving behind isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the love that keeps circling back, generation after generation, growing stronger each time. That's worth more than any inheritance. That's worth everything.